Neighbourhood Watch, Chapter 20. Laura got out of the office car, again an old Warhol, that was lame and made a funny, alarming, asthmatic noise when accelerating. She stowed the keys safely in her bag. The night before, she had been careless, leaving the keys in her car while Josh and herself cleaned Bruce's house. Nigel just had to open the door and drive off, as if she had invited him to do so. Laura examined the school. She remembered the newspaper articles from some years ago, when the borough had restored the building. It would resemble a shining brick as a symbol of enlightenment, of multicultural improvement and globalization. Under the recent dark clouds that seemed to hover directly over the ground, it reminded Laura rather of the golden sundown, of death and decay, so much so that she sensed it in her nostrils. She felt uneasy and hoped the head teacher would help brighten her mood. Gerald Meadows, white-haired master of the shining brick, welcomed her in the schoolyard. They stayed outside the building, but took a walk around. At 11:30, the kids were in their classrooms, and the surroundings appeared peaceful and quiet. The head was about 60, dressed in a corduroy suit with leather patches at the elbows. Laura had visions of an old Ken doll, Barbie's partner, that she used to play with at the age of 7. Gerald Meadows had a different body and face compared to Ken. Meadows had a round face with thick glasses in a modern frameless version. It made him look like a man with Graves' disease. His eyes seemed to pop out of his face with a permanent look of amazement, which could not be correct, because in his more than 30 years at school, Laura was sure he would not be surprised by a lot of things, all kinds of behavior. His brown shirt stretched across a belly that was evidence of a fondness for food. Sure, Edward McCarthy was a brilliant teacher and colleague, very open to his students and their problems, very nice guy indeed. Laura watched Meadows smile. He's a friendly man himself, she thought, not like the overly strict and repressive teachers her own generation had to cope with. Did you stay in contact after he had retired? Sure, the headmaster nodded and spread his arms, as if he wanted to embrace Laura. But it was just a gesture to show his love for his school and students, she gathered, as he slowly lowered his arms again. Edward would come by when I called him for help with extra private lessons. Lately his son Wilbur brought him with his wheelchair. Edward needed help himself, British transport. Ah, private lessons. That's a good catchword. Sanjay Verma was one of his students in the last few months. Did he teach the boy here? No. Meadows looked down at his fingers and shrugged his shoulders after a short while. They are almost next to door neighbors. And Sanjay, well, he had some problems and didn't like to stay on after school for private lessons. Laura felt she was getting closer to the point. What kind of problems? The head teacher wrung his hands and twisted and turned. It was obvious that he didn't want to tell her too much, that he wanted to protect someone or something. Laura wondered what it was exactly. What had Josh said just some days ago? Nobody wants to talk about bashings. Laura decided to take the first step. Was Sanjay bashed? The head teacher's eyes widened, and then he nodded. But this is not usual at our school. It only happened once, to Sanjay, as far as I know. He paused for a bit before continuing and pointed into the direction of the street. He clearly had some problems with his subject. He hesitated, and it cost him energy to go on. Sanjay, well, yes, he got bashed on his way to the bus station. We couldn't find any witnesses, and Sanjay himself wouldn't speak about it. Up to now, he hasn't talked. He's one of the better students. only his knowledge of grammar is a bit superficial. He might be afraid to be mistaken for an eager beaver, while Edward tried to find something out, talked to Sanjay's classmates, went to talk to some parents. So McCarthy suspected someone? Meadows still wrung his hands. Well, yes, in the end he found out that Dan might have been involved in. But we have no evidence. Both boys remain silent. And Dan is quite a nice boy, I should say. I can't imagine him hurting another youngster. This is a serious matter, Laura threw in. We have been investigating a lot of cases of beatings and have asked all schools for their cooperation. Why didn't you call us about this incident? As I have already said, we have no evidence, no eyewitness. We only have a youngster with an Indian background who suffered a black eye and some bruises. Can you imagine what harm that could do at a school that claims to be so tolerant of other heritages? Laura could, but she didn't tell the head. She felt depressed. It was always the same old story. Everybody asked for help, but nobody was willing to get involved. Did you have signs of NF activities at your school? She pointed towards the grubby red brick walls. It looked as if some traces of spray paint had been removed, but yellow and blue paint remained on the cement mortar. No more than anywhere else. Some posters at the bus station, some election campaign flyers like British freedom or British identity and defend rights for whites. You know, that kind of rubbish. They are everywhere, but not at our school. The headmaster nodded, but he didn't seem to be convinced. Laura frowned. This interview was leading nowhere. She needed names. That classmate of Sanjay you mentioned then. What was his surname? Dan. Oh, he's a nice lad. Difficult family background. His parents abandoned him when he was 13 and moved away to Manchester. He lives with a much older brother. I'd really prefer to keep him out of your investigations. That's not your decision, I'm afraid. I need to talk to him. The headmaster shrugged his shoulders, took a deep breath. Then he replied, His name is Dan Bullocks. The bell rang and a tidal wave of hungry, uniformed students on their way to school lunch almost washed Laura out of the schoolyard. Before she was drowned in a sea of bodies, she jumped in the car and left. Her nightmare had come true. Not too many families would share the name Bullocks. Sam had his dirty fingers in the pie again, after all these years. But this time, it was not just a private mess, it was political, and it might involve kidnapping. Where the hell was Nigel?